welcome to the second of my March from the Crag Successor Chapter videos. As I said in my previous video, I was a little bit overly optimistic in trying to do 7 Successor Chapters in a single video. So for this week, I have again taken 2 of those chapters and broken them off into their own breakaway video. Tonight we're going to cover the Doom Eagles and the Mortifcators chapter. So stay tuned and let's dive right into it. Let me turn now then to the Doom Eagles. This is one of my favourite kind of chapters, partly because it's one that's been around for absolutely ages. Their colour scheme's been in the, basically since 2nd edition Space Marine Army book, but also their background. They've got loads of kind of funky little short stories and stuff that you can get on the Black Library website. I remember reading one way back in the pages of the Citadel Journal, all about kind of the induction process to joining the Doom Eagles, and that's quite cool. I might go into a little bit of detail about that. But essentially, the Doom Eagles, then, they were founded out of the remains of the Ultramarines Legion. The first chapter master was only a sergeant at the time. He was one of the only few surviving members of his company. He was part of the 24th chapter of the Ultramarines Legion. His name was Sergeant Twelin Aquila. Gosh, how eminently appropriate. I wonder why they got an eagle as part of their name. But essentially, during the Battle of Calth, he and his particular chapter were heavily bombarded by the Wordbearers' fleet in orbit, to the point where I think him and 2 of his battle brothers were the only surviving members of the 24th chapter of the Ultramarines Legion. When it came time then for Gulliman to pick somebody to lead one of these new nascent chapters, Sergeant, soon to become Chapter Master, Aquila was selected, but it was during the Battle of Calth that his kind of defining moment happened, that essentially he accepted that there was literally nothing he could do to kind of ensure his survival during that. The amount of death that was raining down on him and his chapter. I mean, mainline battle tanks were falling out of the sky and detonating like fragmentation bombs in amongst his men. It was purely down to luck whether or not you lived or died in that moment. And it was at that moment, it's all kind of covered in Dan Abnett's Know No Fear Horus Heresy novel. It was at that moment that Sergeant Aquila realised that essentially he was dead already, that it was easier to think about life as if he were already dead and just fight as if every moment was his last breath. And once he reached that kind of nihilistic mindset, he was ready, and he unleashed hell upon the Wordbearers, and although he walked out of it, he carried that nihilistic attitude forward when the Doom Eagles were founded. So part and parcel of the manner in which the Doom Eagles fight then is that they fight every battle as if they're already dead, as if it genuinely does not matter whether or not they are still breathing at the end of the conflict, as long as their objective is achieved. And that is part and parcel of kind of their recruitment process when they're looking for chapter initiates. So this is all kind of ties into the homeworld that they were given. They were given a planet called Gathis II, which is this kind of rocky, windswept planet. And on the highest mountain, known by the local tribesmen as the Ghost Mountain, they set their fortress monastery, a huge, towering edifice known as the Eyrie. This has a little bit kind of almost of Game of Thrones style overtones. I wouldn't be surprised if there was kind of a moon pool, moon door in the middle of it. The recruitment process for the Doom Eagles then, so it's very detailed. I love kind of the detail. It all comes from this short story that was published back in the pages of the Citadel Journal way back in the day. Essentially, the aspirants of Gathis II climb to the top of one of the highest mountain peaks within the Ghost Mountain range, and there they are then kind of selected by the psychers, the librarians from the chapter. The key thing they are looking for when they kind of delve into their aspirants' minds isn't resilience, it isn't, fortitude or strength of character. It's this already pre-existing sense of nihilism that they're looking for. This acceptance that their lives as they knew them were over, that they are essentially already amongst the dead by going forth to meet the warriors of the Ghost Mountain. What then happens is the few that are selected from the kind of the group of aspirants are taken to a secret location hidden far in the mountain range, and they wake up in this kind of underground cave where once a year underground thermal vents build up to this kind of geyser level jet of scalding water that begins to pour up through the rock underneath their feet, and so they are forced to choose between kind of staying there and just giving in and being scalded to death, or to climb knowing that they're likely already dead. They have to go through endless kind of caverns filled with jagged, razor-sharp rocks that slice them up, valleys filled with thorns that will rip and tear at their flesh, and all along the way, some of them give up and just sit there and are boiled alive, whilst the rest of them continue to press on, until eventually they emerge back into the light. But even then, they know that this narrow ledge that they're on in any minute is going to be filled with a jet of scalding steam and boiling water as it erupts out from the caves below in a kind of scalding waterfall down the side of the mountain range. But nearby are these kind of little tiny, tatty, scrappy paper and kind of essentially the kind of kite that you would make in your back garden as a kid, but as a full-size one that they can strap themselves to. And if they wish, they can throw themselves off the mountain strapped to these kites, these little gliders, rather than stay and be scalded to death, knowing even then that they are essentially casting themselves to their deaths. But if they are fortunate enough, the wind carries them across the mountains to the Eyrie, where they are finally then met and admitted to the chapter, if it is adjudged that they have now accepted that death is inevitable, and they are therefore already, to all intents and purposes, already dead. Then they're allowed to join the ranks of the Doom Eagles. And this kind of flying element is carried over into the kind of battle strategy of the chapter as well. Outside of kind of the Blood Angels successors and the Blood Angels, or kind of the Raven Guard and their successors, the Doom Eagles are probably the chapter most heavily associated with kind of jump pack troops. The very first Doom Eagle model that was painted was kind of an assault marine sergeant. And if you wanted to represent Doom Eagles, you could absolutely do that by taking loads of kind of jump pack equipped troops, so Vanguard veterans and Inceptors. That would look, new kind of assault in Primaris, that would look really cool. In terms of the other major difference within the Doom Eagles, this is something else that I love about the kind of successor chapters of the Ultramarines. The Doom Eagles have something called the Council of Eagles. Essentially, they have a senate within their ranks. So although they have a chapter master who makes the eventual final decision for everything that needs to happen within the chapter, he is advised by all of the captains from all of the different companies, all of the lieutenants, all of the librarians, chaplains, the master of the forge, the master of the apothecarian, all kind of form this central Senate council within the chapter monastery to decide upon momentous events. At any given moment, some of them might be off fighting in kind of campaigns around the galaxy, but those who are present still come together in a remembrance, almost, I suppose, of the same kind of Senate chamber that the Primarch's father, Conor, would eventually meet his end in. It's that tie back to that kind of Roman influence that the Ultramarines have that I love kind of making its appearance in the different ways that their successor chapters organise themselves. The other cool thing that kind of is a bit different about the Doom Eagles is at the centre of their massive kind of chapter monastery, they have an area called the Reclusium, where essentially relics from battle brothers that have fallen or wars that have failed across the galaxy are stored within this massive octagonal tower that's the tallest of all the citadels. So the highest peak of their planet essentially is a museum to death and failure. They are the most emo of all chapters. At the centre, the very centre of this is a silvered vault in which relics from the Battle of the Emperor's Palace, so chunks of the walls of the Emperor's Palace, a single feather from the wing of Sanguinius is apparently on display there. And it's said that the kind of psychic scream of the ghosts of those who have died within this tower can be heard outside the greater kind of sphere of the planet. It echoes across the galaxy. The other thing they have is they have a Chamber of the Fallen, where the name of every battle brother who has died is laser etched into the floor of this chamber. And it's kind of a memoriam is kept there. It might be a little fragment of their armour, or an eye lens, or a bolter shell, or whatever. But a piece of every single battle brother that fights is held there. And it will supposedly be that it is held there for as long as the chapter exists. Although they are dead, they are remembered. In terms of their appearance, they are dressed in silvered armour. Their chapter symbol is a stylized kind of black eagle on the left shoulder pad. They then wear the squad markings on the right shoulder pad. The chest eagle is picked out in red, and the company numbers are, instead of being displayed on the shoulder pad rims, those stay kind of shiny silver. The right knee pad instead displays the codex, the company number. So this is still following the lines of the Codex Astartes, white for the first company, yellow for the second company, and so on and so forth. And then a number displayed within the center of that knee pad marks out which company as well, kind of just giving an extra little kind of marker in that regard. Let's move on then to the Mortifactors chapter. I said that the Doom Eagles were the most emo. Well, they were the most emo of the Ultramarine Successor chapters. The Mortifactors are by far the most goth. So these are perhaps one of the more divergent chapters when it comes to kind of their following of the Codex Astartes. They are likewise, they're still one of the primogenitor chapters founded at the end of the Horus Heresy. Rupert Guilliman picked a captain by the name of Sasebo Tezuka, not a name you want to try and say if you haven't got your teeth in, to be the new first chapter master for this legion. They come from the planet Postal, essentially almost a night world. It's a planet where the sun never rises more than a sliver above the horizon, which I'm not sure quite how that works, because there must always be a side of the sun that is the planet that is facing the sun. Maybe it's just permanently in some kind of eclipse. I don't know. But in any event, it's therefore described as being a planet of frigid, icy plains populated by nomadic tribes that practice barbaric customs, including cannibalism. Yes, those are clearly the people that you want becoming super soldiers. Whatever. The Mortifactors are noted for a couple of practices. First and foremost, it's their obsession with kind of skulls and death. They're a very dark and brooding chapter that honour their dead to the point where when one of their brothers dies, the highest honour that can be awarded them is to kind of scrimshaw their bones and form their bones into part of the armour of a new brother. Also, the chapter is particularly devoted to head-taking. They're never happier than when they're beheading the enemies of the Emperor, and there's a whole shrine within their chapter monastery in which they have kind of cleansed skulls of defeated foes. They regularly go to war wearing kind of skeletal face paint, and even have kind of bone-inlaid power scythes in battle. It is this that has led to quite a bit of suspicion amongst the wider community that maybe the gene seed is not, in fact, Ultramarine gene seed that was used to found this chapter. Maybe instead it is a certain other bone-armoured, scythe-wielding chapter, legion, that was used in the establishment of this chapter. What I would say to that is what I'll say to the Silver Skulls when we get to them a little bit later is, given the reaction that Guilliman had to Belisarius Caul's comments about, oh, I've got the gene seed for all of the legions. I can make primary marines for any legion, just say. Guilliman's reaction of no, and furthermore, no. But that makes it unlikely to me that Guilliman would have sanctioned the creation of a chapter based upon one of his traitor brother's gene seeds. But nonetheless, the similarities are there. The other major kind of strange custom that the Mortifactors do is they're very heavily obsessed with the Emperor's Tarot. And this is something that their founding chapter master, Tezuko, was all about in terms of even when it came to picking the planet that he founded the chapter on. He first cast the Emperor's Tarot and then trusted to the fate of the cards to guide him to the world that he would establish his chapter on. I mean, if you're going to ask a whole bunch of playing cards where you should establish your chapter, I'm not necessarily convinced that you're not using Traitor Gene Seed when it comes to establishing your chapter, because your judgment is called into question. But nonetheless, this kind of obsession with fate and the casting of the bones, the casting of the cards, has carried on down the years. And in particular, one of the most famous examples is at near the end, near 998 of Millennium 41. The entirety of the chapter, under the guidance of the chapter master of the time, Lord Magyar, gathered together inside the Fortress Monasteries. Presumably they kind of get, no, crusades are cancelled, wars are stopped, everybody's having a day off. It's the feast of the Emperor's Ascension, and they all sat and meditated, and as one collectively prophesied the return of Ghazghkull and the Third War for Armageddon. Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly surprised the Inquisition haven't paid these guys a visit already. As a result of this prophecy, the Mortifactors entrusted kind of the guardianship of the chapter monastery to their chapter serfs, and every single member of the Mortifactors chapter set off for Armageddon to wage war upon the planet. When they returned, they discovered that Hive Fleet Leviathan had, a splinter of Hive Fleet Leviathan had separated off and had arrived at their chapter planet and devoured the entire population of Postal. Ever since then, they've therefore been a fleet-based chapter, and they are kind of reinforced by Primaris Marines following their losses in the War of Armageddon, following the return of Raboot Gulliman. And they're one of the chapters, actually, that accompanied Raboot Gulliman on his kind of crusade to Terra to visit the Golden Throne. One of my other favourite Mortifactor moments is, because they are so inherently superstitious, middle of M38, so 537 M38, the Mortifactors were dispatched to repel Abaddon the Despoiler, one of his Black Crusades that was raging at the time, and were asked to fight alongside the Lamenters chapter. When I say asked, they were ordered to wage war alongside the brothers from the Lamenters chapter, the old Blood Angel successors. But they were so convinced that the Lamenters chapter was cursed that they refused point blank to engage in the conflict and left the Lamenters to fight against the entirety of the Black Legion for 6 weeks on their own, until the White Scars and other kind of Ultramarine Successor Chapters came through to reinforce them. Ever since then, the Lamenters have not yet forgiven them for this. I'm honestly not surprised. The other perhaps most famous appearance of the Mortifactors in kind of the lore of Warhammer 40k is in the second of the Uriel Ventris novels, when the Tyranids attack the planet of Tarsis Ultra. And Uriel, well worth a read, it's one of Graham McNeil's great novels. But while Uriel Ventris is desperately trying to kind of follow the Codex Astartes, and he's very happy to be fighting alongside one of the brotherly chapters from the successor chapters, like the Nova Marines or the Eagle Warriors. No, he gets the Mortifactors, who turn up covered in bones. I mean, it's literally like, hey, brother, I'm covered in bones. I feel like using that bone. Can I have it? Oh, he's dead. He was a very nice man. Can I have his bones, please? Yeah, it's well worth a read just for the utter madness that the Mortifactors are portrayed as in that book. The only other really kind of interesting thing about the Mortifactors for me is that they are one of the more kind of, I suppose, religious chapters, for want of a better word. While most of the space, especially the Ultramarine successors, respect the Emperor as the greatest human who ever lived, and respect the Primarch as the greatest descendant of that greatest man who ever lived. The Mortifactors, coming as they do from this kind of feral tribal warrior cults, consider the Emperor to be the ultimate warrior that ever lived, and regard him as being this kind of great spirit of the universe, who they kind of therefore venerate as a warrior spirit. And I suppose it's not, listen, we're not talking Lorgar style, pounding on the Lectitio Divinatus here, but it is very much different to the way in which a lot of the other chapters venerate the Emperor through respect. Here it is out and out tribal, it's out and out tribal worship, really. There's no other word for it. Since the destruction of Postal by this kind of splinter feet of Hive Fleet Leviathan, the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus have now built a new fortress monastery for the Mortifactors. This is known as the Basilica Mortis, and it orbits this vast kind of space dock that orbits the dead world of Postal, stabbing out into space, this kind of adamantium mountain, essentially. And at any given time, different sort of Mortifactors strike cruisers, their fleet, will be there docking with this space station, bringing back recruits from warrior worlds across the galaxy to be inducted back into the Mortifactors Legion, Mortifactors chapter. In terms of the interior of the Basilica Mortis, well, for all the high-tech wonder that the Adeptus Mechanicus wrought for them, the interior is just covered in death. They've got skulls everywhere, whether it's skulls of defeated enemies, skulls of worthy brothers, skulls of the occasional chapter serf who was particularly good at their job, statues that look like desiccated corpses, because they are desiccated corpses, the mummified and dried out bodies of battle brothers who died in glorious combat and are now considered to reside at the feast of the ultimate warrior. The main chapel of the Mortifactors is basically just paved in skulls. For a chapter that is extremely obsessed with skulls, I'm honestly surprised that more of them have not fallen to corn, given their obsession with cannibalism, that they use the requirement that each neophyte must kill and eat their prey and claim its skull before they can earn their name and their place within the chapter. Any neophyte who has yet to make and kill an enemy of the Emperor is considered to be a faceless. Given their obsession with death, there's a large number of dreadnoughts that make up the kind of Mortifactors chapter. Their armour is styled a combination of black and bone. I think the most definitive guidance to it is that the upper legs, hands, feet, top of their helmet, backpack and chest area are done in black, with the kind of lower shins, the arms, the lower half of the helmet, the upper part of the backpack and the aquila all picked out in bone. The shoulder rims of their armour is at least matching the codex, so they have white shoulder rims for the first company, gold shoulder rims for the second company, red for the third company, and so on. And then they have the chapter symbol on their left shoulder pad, which is just a giant stylized skull. In terms of if you wanted to represent the Mortifactors, I would strongly suggest at least you have a few chaplains in there to kind of represent their tribal shamans, really, leading the kind of the warrior cult. It would be a kind of chat thing where I'd imagine maybe you could use some of the Power Scythe models from the Death Guard range and model them up as like Vanguard veterans with relic blades, or model them up maybe as like heroes of the chapter with great big double-handed swords. Blade Guard veterans actually with scythes would look really cool. I'd love to see some of that. Okay, yeah, so there we go. That was the Doom Eagles and the Mortifactors. Two really cool chapters. I absolutely love the background on those. Hopefully you've enjoyed this. Come back next week for more Space Marine Successor Chapters. I'm going to be going all the way through March with these. As I've said already, if you've painted up any of the Space Marine Successor Chapters, any of the ones I've covered, or generally any Ultramarines Successor Chapters, I'd love to see them. Stick them up on Twitter or on the Morehammer Discord. Just slap a hashtag on there, hashtag Morehammer, hashtag March from the Crag, and I will check it out. Cool. I've already seen an awesome Aurora chapter that someone's shared with me over on Twitter. I retweeted that, so go over and check out my Twitch if you'd like to see that. Otherwise, as ever, thank you very much for watching. I will catch you next time. Bye for now.